Okay, so we are in Matthew chapter 18. We're gonna go over the same passage we read last week, but if you'll remember, last week we only focused on the first chunk. Today we'll make it into the second chunk after covering one major thing that we didn't get to last week. So, well, I don't know about major thing, but interesting thing. So let me reread the whole thing here. If you'll remember, your Bible probably has a subtitle in the middle of this, but I lumped it all together because before this passage, remember, before verse 10, it talks about Jesus. It's when Jesus brings a little child. It says you have to have faith like this child, right? Or actually it says you have to become like this child. And if you don't, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Then he pronounces a woes or judgment against anyone who causes one of his little ones to stumble, right? And so that was a couple weeks ago. Talked about that. We also covered that the little ones in this passage, most scholars agree. I agree. I think it's plain. It's also a way that Matthew uses the term in other verses in his gospel, that the little ones does not just mean literal children. It's all of God's children. It's all believers, okay? And that'll become more clear even further in this passage. So the reason I have this lumped together is because it's talking about the little ones, his children. We're going to read this passage right now that mentions the little ones again. And if you continue into past probably your next subtitle, which is around verse 15, it's still talking about, I believe, believers, his little ones, you know? And so we'll see more of that as we go. Okay, verse 10 says, "See that you don't look down on one of these little ones, because I tell you that in heaven their angels continually view the face of my Father in heaven. For the Son of Man has come to save the lost. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, won't he leave the 99 on the hillside and go and search for the stray? And if he finds it, I assure you, he rejoices over that sheep more than the 99 that did not go astray. In the same way, it is not the will of your Father in heaven that one of these little ones perish." Now, again, little ones, I hope it makes sense to everybody. If it's talking about believers and a believer going astray, but then the heart of this shepherd to go after that one that has gone astray. So our focus last week, we talked about all the different ways that people go astray. We spent a good amount of time there. And we took most of our time talking about that. And then at the end, I closed with, hey, I don't want us to miss the main point. The actual point is God wants to go after that one who has strayed. And it's the heart of the Father that one, even though it's just one, and even if the other 99 are fine, he still wants that one, right? And so that was kind of the big point last week. But there's a couple things we didn't hit in this section that are interesting. First of all, verse 11. Does anybody's Bible not have verse 11? Okay. So this is worth chatting about briefly. We're not going to spend a lot of time, but we've kind of hit this issue on some other verses. It's the same deal. This is whenever your Bible is missing a verse like that, it's not because they're trying to remove those verses from the Bible. Rather, as more scholarship has been done, and they find even more manuscripts, and they date those manuscripts, right? What they'll notice is sometimes there are some variations, right? This manuscript has this one sentence that this other manuscript does not have. Or I shouldn't say this one. It's usually not one. You know, these 50 manuscripts have this sentence, and these other 50 do not have it. Does that make sense? And so what the scholars have to decide is which manuscripts do we trust most. And so once they date them, they go with the oldest. That's what tends to happen, okay? So some Bibles, some translators, they'll still leave it in the translation I'm reading from. They left it in there. It puts it in brackets. I love when Bible translations let you know that you're reading something, that there's something special about what you're reading. So my translation leaves those verses in, but it puts them in brackets. And I know, as the reader, that's one of those verses that other translations don't have because the oldest manuscripts don't have it. And so if your translation left out verse 11, it's because those oldest ones, they believe, hey, we're going to go with that. That's the most trustworthy, we think. We're going to go with that. We're just going to leave it out. We don't think it was in the original text. Does that make sense? Right. So there's still cross references, and it may match with a verse in Luke, but in Matthew that that isn't in the earliest copies. Does that make sense to everybody? And so, so the reason, why does it even have a verse number? Well, initially, in the manuscripts they had back at the time, they put it in, it was numerized. Is that a word? Numbered? It was numbered. It was, we'll go with numbered. It was numbered, right? And then as more manuscripts were found, older copies, they said, we don't think that was in the original, so they just leave out that verse. Obviously, they're not going to renumber the entire Gospel of Matthew or the entire, chapter or whatever. So they just leave out that verse. Okay, but we've seen that, not too big a deal. But something that's very interesting is back in verse 10. I think this is pretty interesting. It says, see that you don't look down on one of these little ones. Okay, we didn't focus on this too much last week, but Jesus' initial instruction is don't look down on his little ones. Who are the little ones? His believers. So who should we not look down on? Which one? Which believers? All of them. Okay. Now here's one interpretation. Some people would say maybe this has to do more with new believers. Personally, you could take it that way. Personally, I just think it's just believers. We're just not supposed to look down on any of Jesus's little ones. I think I've been serving the Lord for a decent amount of time, but I would say I'm still his little one. You know what I mean? I don't think like I'm a big one. You know what I mean? Or something like that, I don't think it's like, yeah, we're still children of God, right? Yeah, and other passages in the scriptures, remember we've talked about this idea, other passages in the scriptures help us understand certain terms. Like in 1 John, I think it's 1 John. It's one of the 3 Johns at the end of the Bible. I can't remember which one. But it has that verse that says, what's the wording? I don't know the exact wording. But it says, how wonderful? No. How something it is that, how's it worded? I want to know the wording. See the love of God. What love, there it is. What love God has for us, something like that we should be called children of God. And we are, it says. And that's talking about all believers. So when it comes to a verse like this, I kind of take it as, I think it's all believers. I think we're all his little ones. We're all children of God. Even if we've been serving the Lord a long time, I don't think we become adolescents of God or adults of God or something, It's just, we're all his children. Okay, but it says, see that you don't look down on one of these little ones, because I tell you that in heaven, their angels continually view the face of my Father in heaven. We didn't talk about this last week, okay? But it is interesting, okay? How is it worded? Does anybody have a different translation that's worded differently, where it says, because I tell you...
I tell you that the angel in heaven always sees the face of my Father.
Okay. Any other wordings, or is it pretty much all the same? Got a different wording there? Their angels are always in the presence of my Heavenly Father. Okay, so there's a key word here that makes this very interesting. Obviously, I think everybody here knows the Bible talks about angels, right? But there's a key word in here. Anybody know which word stands out to me? They're angels. This is very interesting. Okay, so it doesn't say the angels. It says they're angels. So whose angels? His little ones, right? Which we already said is believers. Okay, so this does point us. So personally, I don't like the term guardian angel, just because I don't see it. But that idea, I think, is there in the Bible, that we have angels watching over us. Now, I don't know the details of how it works, because, for example, does that mean I have certain angels that are specifically assigned to me? Yes. Or one? Could be. But how do I know my angel doesn't also look out for Claude? Does that make sense? So it could be either way. Don't try to, you know what I mean? Don't try to say more than the text says. But we all have, it sounds like we all have angels. Again, I don't know if it's a one-to-one correspondence, right? But we have some people, we have some angels looking out for us.
So David and I actually have been talking about this a lot lately. And in Acts chapter 12, when Peter is released from Herod's prison by the angel, they actually make the same comment when he's not knocking on Mary's door, and they don't believe that Peter's there, and they make the comment that it must be his angel.
Now, okay, on that one, I don't think it means angel. So there's multiple interpretations of that verse. I think, we see this in the Gospels also, I think they mean his ghost. Yeah, so because they see Peter. That's the thing. Why would they think it's Peter's angel? Except they see Peter. Does that make sense? So they see Peter, but they know he's locked up, and they know he's supposed to be killed or whatever. So they think it must be his ghost. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the most common interpretation of that particular verse. Now, could they have actually meant his angel that guards him? Could have, but I don't know. I think that's more of a leap than, because we do see in other places, the disciples themselves. Y'all remember what they thought when they saw Jesus walking on the water? It's a ghost, yeah. So we see that idea, that they had a thinking of spirits looking like people, and they would see certain things that were beyond understanding, and they attributed it to some kind of ghost. So anyway, but maybe they did. It's possible. But the more common thing is that it seems to be they think it's Peter from the dead, basically, his ghost. Okay, but there is more to say about this. So this isn't the only verse that gives this idea that of their angels, right? So angels specifically assigned to believers. So Hebrews chapter 1, I don't think we need to go read that one. Actually, yeah, let's not go read that one. It's not as definitive. Daniel chapter 10 talks about how angels are assigned to represent and protect nations. We don't need to go read it, I don't think, but just so you know, that's there. But the one that I think is most interesting is probably Psalm 91. And in Psalm 91, there's a verse. Yeah, Psalm 91, verse 11. Is that what you said, brother? Yeah. If I could find, if I remembered how to count. Okay, so in Psalm 91, if you read the whole psalm, some people like to recite this psalm. It's a psalm of protection. But if you go to verse 11, I don't want to read the whole thing right now. It says, "For he will give his angels orders concerning you to protect you in all your ways." So we do have this idea that God uses angels to do what? What was the word used? To protect. Or what would be another word? Guard, right? And maybe, yeah, in some translations say guard. So that's where the phrase like guardian angel comes from. I'm not going to over-explain myself. Y'all get what I mean. But sometimes people have whole theologies around that idea. But this does show us that, and maybe you've prayed this before, maybe you've never prayed anything like this, but this does show us that we could ask God for protection via his angels, right? Lord, send your angels to protect me. Totally reasonable, not unbiblical or anything. Now, I would say some worries that I might have. Should we be praying to angels? No. Should we be worshiping angels? No. We have examples in the scriptures where we're specifically told, no. The most famous, I think, is Revelation, where John falls down and the angel's like, no, I'm just a fellow servant, worship God, Okay, so that's important. Here's another thing. In the Bible, or let me ask it this way, is it possible to have encounters with and interactions with angels? Is that possible? How do we know? Many encounters in the scriptures. So the question is, does God use angels that way sometimes? Yes, absolutely. Now, I have to add one caveat. Are we ever instructed to seek those interactions? Are we ever told like, hey, it's great to have visitations from angels, so you need to always be trying to have a visitation from an angel? No. Now that might not seem wrong. Does anybody here know why I would caution anybody against seeking interactions with angels, wanting to have visitations? Say it again. Could be. So there's one danger. You begin to see the angel or angels as your mediator to God rather than who's the true mediator? Jesus, very good. Hey, y'all are doing good today. We got some good Bible knowledge here, right? Jesus is the mediator. Okay, so that's one danger. What other danger?
Deceiving angels.
Deceiving angels. What do you mean by that?
They're not holy angels.
Very good, yeah. Not holy angels, you said, what was the other word?
Dark or fallen angels.
Dark or fallen angels. You also said the word demons, right? The Bible tells us that one of the things that Satan does is he masquerades as an angel of light. Okay, and so it makes perfect sense that also his angels, right, his fallen angels work in a similar fashion, right? That one of the things that they do is present themselves, but obviously they have unholy, evil motives. Does that make sense to everybody? So yeah, we don't want to seek after that. I would also point people toward famous examples. Like if I had to mic drop kind of thing, yeah, don't do that. My example would be Joseph Smith. He had an angel that talked to him. And if y'all don't know who Joseph Smith is, that's the founder of Mormonism, who claims to have been visited by an angel Moroni, who gave him all these revelations about there was this lost tribe of Israel that came over to the Americas. In case y'all don't know that, this is what the Mormons believe. There's this other tribe of Israel that was over here, and Jesus had a whole ministry here in the Americas also, after what we read in the Bible. He had this whole ministry here, and of course, this was all revealed to him by an angel Moroni. Now, either I think he's just a total liar and makes up the story, or some very real stuff happened, but not an angel sent by God. And one last thing before we move on from this. Even Paul writes, y'all know the verse I'm going to mention where he warns against, nobody knows where I'm going? It's okay. There's a verse where Paul writes that if you hear another gospel, even if an angel tells you some other gospel, no. So why would Paul warn that? Because again, on our end, we might say, man, if an angel's telling you, you trust whatever the angel says. No. It's exactly for the reasons we're discussing. Sometimes, right, there are spiritual beings who are not all good and all holy and serving the Lord. They've turned against the Lord, and they operate under Satan's rule and reign, under his dominion, and they work his means among humanity. So you can't trust. So even a very spiritual experience, you can't necessarily trust it. And what is the measuring line about how we can trust or when we should trust or not trust? Test it how? What's the main test? The Word. If it contradicts the Word, right? No, that was not from the Lord.
It also says that we're not to command the angels. We can ask, but he is the one that commands.
Very good. Yeah. The Psalm 91 verse, right? Yeah. That he commands his angels. So we can ask. So like I said earlier, not an inappropriate prayer to ask God to send angels to protect me. I need, totally fine. Well, she's saying God commands the angels, not us. No, we call God to direct them. We ask God, all our prayers, I think this is very consistent throughout the scriptures. We don't pray to saints who have died before us. We don't pray to angels. We don't pray to any other than God himself. And he can do all the things we just mentioned. Send an angel, So I've heard stories from people about visitations from angels that I believe, and I say, man. Now, the way that they've come, though, is in a time of heavy, desperate need. You know what I mean? Or some of the ones I've heard, It's a time of heavy, desperate need, everything's terrible. Sometimes it's health conditions, sometimes it's, different stuff. But they never asked oh, my guardian angel, I need you to come visit me right now or something. It was never like that. And I don't think it should be like that. This is very important. I don't think we should be seeking out visitations because that, again, for all the reasons we already said. But we can ask God, I need your protection. We can even ask God. One of the other things the scriptures teach us that angels do is they serve as messengers. So we might be requesting, Lord, like, for example, a heavy decision in life or something. Lord, I need your direction, and I need to know for sure exactly what I'm supposed to do. God, make it clear to me. You know, I want to be obedient, but I just need to be sure about how, all that, right? We might be pleading with the Lord for that. Could he send an angel?
Yes.
He could. And answer that prayer through the angel, right? And the angel brings this message and brings clarity to my situation and everything. That could totally happen. But again, we leave that in God's hands, and he's the decider of when his angels need to be enacted. Does that make sense? Okay, so I didn't want to go on to the next section because that is pretty interesting. That we do have angels that seem to be assigned to us. Again, I don't think there's any clear Bible concerning the assignment and the numbers, and I have my own angel, and that's nobody else's. You know what I mean? The scriptures aren't clear. Okay.
Can I read one of the scriptures in 34, verses 6 and 7, if you don't mind?
Mm-hmm.
It says, "The poor man called, and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them." So he went to the Lord to ask for that help when he was in trouble.
Right.
The Lord actually sends him an angel of the Lord.
Well, that one's Jesus. So remember in the Old Testament,
Because they call it as that he's an angel also.
the angel of the Lord. So this is another interesting fine point. We've talked about this before. There's angels all over the Bible, but in the Old Testament, when you see the angel of the Lord, there's some special characteristics. Some stories you wouldn't notice. Like you'll just read it and you're like, it's an angel. But then there's other times where they're doing things, where this angel of the Lord, the angel of the Lord, is doing things that only God does. Receiving worship from Joshua. There's an encounter that. But we already said angels don't receive worship, right? In another instance, you'll hear the angel of the Lord say, "I, the Lord, blah, blah, blah." He calls himself Yahweh. Right? So you put all that together, it's very clear that when God manifested himself in physical form in the Old Testament, it's referred to as the angel of the Lord, and it's Jesus. It's pre-incarnate Jesus showing up in physical human form before he came to live his life and go to the cross for us. Does that make sense? So that's just a really cool thing that Jesus has always been, and he shows up in some incredible places too and situations that I've shared about some of them, but some of them stand out to me because, like y'all have heard me talk about the story of Hagar in the Old Testament. Hagar, I remember I was deeply convicted one morning reading it it's Genesis chapter 16. Hagar to me is an unimportant side person in the scriptures. Now that's terrible to say out loud, I know, but that's how I felt, right? Because again, this is not. We shouldn't think this way, but this is how I was thinking. Who really matters? Well, I'm thinking Abraham and Sarah are the ones that matter because they're supposed to have Isaac, and that line eventually leads to Jesus. But if you remember the story, Abraham has a kid with Hagar. That's not the lineage that leads to Jesus, right? Eventually she's turned away. She's told to go off on her own. So in my head, Hagar doesn't matter, right? Because Abraham and Sarah, Isaac's line is the one that matters. And one morning I'm reading Genesis 16, and I knew this story, but you forget, right? And I'm just reading, and it's the angel of the Lord that shows up to Hagar and talk to her whenever she's running from Sarai. And I was deeply convicted because here I am thinking Hagar doesn't matter, and God himself she mattered to him. And so that's just a Yes, and she's the one that coins that title El Roy, which is the God who sees, and that's the big interaction there. Have I truly seen the one who sees me? And it's very clear she physically saw him. That was Jesus, pre-incarnate Christ, showing up, in a time of need for her. Anyway, beautiful stuff. So, but yes, you're right in that verse. The request is being made to God, and then it didn't have to be the angel of the Lord, but the way it was answered was through a visitation. Yeah. Okay, let's let's keep going. I wanted to for sure touch that because that's interesting, and I wanted to mention that verse that was left out. I think we've covered the main things from that chunk. Now, I want to proceed to verse 15 to 20. And remember, the reason we're covering this together is because I think the whole idea of little ones is still in the mix, right? And that does matter for what we're going to read next. Okay, verse 15. If your brother sins against you, does anyone's Bible not say against you?
Mine doesn't, just says if your brother or sister sins.
If your brother or sister sins. Okay, we're gonna come back to that. Okay, mine says if your brother sins against you, go and rebuke him in private. Does anybody use a different word than rebuke?
Point out,
Go tell him his fault.
point out their fault.
Go point out their fault. Anybody else?
And then it says between you and him.
Before that, for rebuke, what's the word? Okay, the fault. Yeah. Okay. Now, look what it says next. Remember, this is still Jesus talking. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. We're going to come back to that. But if he won't listen, take one or two more with you so that by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact may be established. If he pays no attention to them, tell the church. But if he doesn't pay attention even to the church, let him be like an unbeliever and a tax collector to you. I assure you, whatever you bind on earth is already bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth is already loosed in heaven. Again, I assure you, if two of you on earth agree about any matter that you pray for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there among them. So I really want to get to the end thing, but I don't know if we'll get there. I want to get to those last lines if we have time, but I want to go in order. So does everybody understand the situation what's the situation that Jesus is addressing? And he's giving us instruction for how to address it. Specifically, sin in my own life when I sin? Okay, so somebody else has sinned, right? We said some translations say against you, some don't, right? Okay, this is that same issue we read about verse 11. Exact same issue. The earliest manuscripts just say if your brother sins. That's it. It just stops right there. And then it gives the instruction. Some of the later manuscripts add against you. So that's why there's some of the differences in translations there. Now in yours, Cassie, you mentioned it didn't just say brother.
Yeah, mine says if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault. Just between you.
Okay, so this is good. This isn't the point of the passage, but I just want to give quick Bible, just so we know how we're reading our Bibles. By the way, I'm supposed to schedule a How to Read Your Bible seminar for us at some point for like a Friday night or something, and just haven't gotten to it yet. Glenn, remind me, because once it's on the calendar, it's going to happen. It just hasn't been put on a calendar yet, you know? Okay, but here's the deal. This is a good thing to know about your particular translation. Who else's translation said if you're brothers or sisters? Did anybody else say brothers or sisters? Okay. So this is good for you to know about your translation. Some translations are trying to be more formal, right? And more exact, Greek to English, or Old Testament Hebrew to English. And then some are trying to capture meaning more. And they might adjust the words to make the meaning more apparent, okay? Basically, the translators they've decided, hey, this is about all believers. This isn't just about men. You know what I mean? But in their time, the way they would write, they just said brothers. And it was just understood. It's everybody, but it's, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? So some translations decide, well, it says brothers, we're only going to write brothers. And we're supposed to kind of figure out when it means just men and when it means men and women. Does that make sense? And other translations say, the translators, they say, no, we should let people know when it's something that's directed only to men and when it would include all believers. So, on this particular verse, some translations said, this is all believers, we're going to put brothers and sisters. Does that make sense? So, this is a good thing to know about your translation. So if your translation said brothers and sisters, just understand there's lots of verses throughout your Bible that are like that. A whole bunch of verses that say brothers and sisters. In the original, it just says brothers. And as long as you know that, and as long as you understand why, and go for it. Okay. But I do think this, by the way, I do think this applies to all believers. I don't think this is just to men. Okay, but the original is just brother, right? So if your brother sins against you, or if your brother sins, go and rebuke him in private. Now let's talk about just that. What do y'all think? No, exactly. A lot of people are going to, no. Why not?
It just depends on what it is.
Okay, she said it's uncomfortable. You said it depends what it is.
Like if somebody wrongs you, like it depends on the wrong. If it's something really bad, you don't want to be face to face with them.
Okay, if it's something really wrong, you don't want to have to go face to face with them. Maybe you're, okay.
Yeah, we don't like confrontation.
Okay, maybe you don't like confrontation.
Should we do it or shouldn't we do it?
I just said, what do you think? What do you think about this instruction?
Yeah, I think we should do it.
Now, everybody's answer should be, well, if Jesus said, we should. You know, like, I mean, that should be.
Do it, but I'm gonna be like, oh.
Say it again?
I want to. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna be like, really?
Yeah, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to wait like a month until I can build up the courage, right, or whatever.
It's kind of like Sunday when you told everybody, if you're living together, you can get married.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of like that.
Well, I get special privileges as the preacher. I just say it and it lands where it lands. But yeah, he sent me this video of this comedian that just called out somebody in the audience, like a couple, and they're like, "Are y'all married?" And they're like, "No." He's like, "You love each other?" And they're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Get married," like, you know. And it went way further than that. He was mean about it. I mean, he really put the guy on. He was like, "Do it right now, just propose." He was like, you know, he was offering money toward the ring, like he was, and the guy was like, not gonna do it, you know. Anyway, yeah, he sent that to me and put, "This was you on Sunday," you know. Okay, but I mean, our answer should be yes, we should do that. But I did want to talk about exactly the issues that we're mentioning here. I don't know historically if the church in the past has been good at this, right? But right now, I feel like we're terrible at this. Okay? We are terrible at doing this. Erica, you had something?
Well, I was just gonna ask because of how it's like the loyalty offenses. Like,
Mhm.
would that be part of like if we offend?
So, okay, very good. So back at the beginning of chapter 18, remember it said, woe, let's see, whoever causes the downfall of one of these little ones who believes in me, it would be better if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck, thrown into the sea. Woe to the world because of offenses, for offenses must come. Now, offenses here, I think the idea would apply to like an offense, but contextually, Glenn talked about it that week, but it seems to be applying more, not so much to like you said something and somebody got offended, but the offense being mentioned seems to be you caused someone else to sin. You've caused, you know, through your actions, you've caused someone to sin, which in itself is then sin. Does that make sense? So this seems to be, so there's one person sins somehow, and it causes others to stumble somehow. Now that could be an offense and a grudge, right? I did something wrong to somebody, then now they're living with like this, this ugliness and hatred in their heart toward me or something like that. That would still count, a typical offense. But it would also count, or I think it would also count if the wrong that was done was not toward me, or maybe it was toward me, but I'm not like real sensitive about it, so I'm not personally offended, but it was sin. Does that make sense? And the wording in this verse is just, if your brother sins.
Is the brother a believer?
Good question. Are we talking about believers here? It says brother. Did you ask that knowing the answer, sister? Okay, good. Yeah. Look at you all teachery, right? What do you all think, right? Yeah, so yes, this is talking about believers. That word brother implies a believer. Okay? And that is an important distinction. We learn in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, Paul actually writes that we're not to judge those outside the church, but those within. Okay? So that whole, this is common in our culture, but that whole never judge anybody kind of thing, that's not a biblical idea. That idea that you can never call somebody out, you can never think something that someone did is wrong, you can never, Jesus right here is saying, no, if they sinned, you go tell them. Which means I would have to be in agreement that they sinned. And I'm about to call them out on it. Does that make sense? Now, what is the goal in this? Because the next verses tell us. Everybody look. What's the goal? If he listens to you, what? Okay, mine says you've won your brother. How does other translation say it?
Thou hast gained thy brother.
Oh, look at you all 1600s-ish. Okay. Who else? You've gained your brother? You've won your... Okay. So yeah, the idea here is, look, somebody sins. I go talk to them about this, and they actually listen. Now, let's be clear. It says, if he listens. Does that just mean he heard your words? No. This means he really took in what was said, or she, right? They really took it in and actually acknowledged the wrong and, assumedly made a change, right? You know what? So Claude comes and calls me out on something, and I say, you know what? You're right. That was wrong. That was dumb. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I won't do it again. Okay? And if I listen, he won his brother back. We're all good again. There's nothing between us, right? But even if it wasn't a personal offense to Claude, what if I'm sinning against my wife, but Claude, who is my friend, says like, nah, man, you can't be doing that. So it might not be directed at Claude, but I want to be very clear. I think the scriptures tell us we're allowed and actually encouraged to go address the sin. Let's ask this question. If it's all awkward for us to do this, right? And my contention is that the American church is very bad at this right now. But why do y'all think, can we get to a deeper reason, why do you think God tells us to do this? Why do you think this is Jesus' instruction?
Because it's right before you get to the other part, which is try and do it between you guys.
Mhm.
You know, kind of not to bring more shame to the situation, because from there it goes, and if not, bring more.
Okay.
If not, bring the church. So
Yeah.
kind of like give them a break, give them a chance, an opportunity.
To do it in private.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Private, because again, depending on the sin, right? But you don't want to shame them either, so you're really trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
The next step that comes.
I agree. There's actually a lot of grace in this process in that you go to them privately first. So you're not trying to embarrass them in front of everybody, right? This is not like a public thing, right? You go to them first in private. It only, like Vanessa said, it only goes more public as they refuse to acknowledge the issue. Does that make sense? Okay, so Vanessa kind of answered why do it in private. But I meant, here's my question. In general, why does Jesus call us to address the sins of our brothers or sisters?
Cam, you want to say something? No. So I take this two ways. In verse 17, he clearly paints it. She says, tell it unto the church. First tell it to him, then 2 or 3, then tell the church. Jesus doesn't give them any other option. He says address it no matter what. So you think, okay, well, why do you have to address it no matter what? What builds from not addressing something? You get resentment. You
Okay.
get resentment towards somebody, and then that drives division within the church, the body of Christ, but then also specifically within the church, and then it rips apart the church, and God doesn't want anybody living in that.
Okay, so there's one answer. It can breed, the offense breeds, what was the first word you used? I already forgot. Resentment, yeah. The offense breeds a resentment, which leads to division, which can cause division among more of the people in the church and could even split a church, all kinds of stuff. So that's one. What others? There's more. I mean, we could probably think of a few reasons, but that is what I'm talking about. These are reasons Jesus wants this addressed.
I think depending on the sin, it can kind of be a downward spiral and just consume you. So like, it talks about like letting someone stumble. Like if someone has like a gambling addiction or like something like that, and it allows them to stray further and further and further from God, at the end of the day, like eternity's on the line.
Very good.
Heaven be crowded, so.
So there's our second reason. This sin is leading to a further spiral in their life toward more sin, and ultimately, or the ultimate thing we care about is a destruction of their relationship with the Lord. Okay?
Reconciliation is the ultimate purpose of doing that.
And why do you think that's so important to the Lord? It just is. That's who he is, right? Yeah. She said reconciliation is the ultimate goal. So Jesus wants us to be able to actually reconcile, you know?
I think reconciliation is the ultimate goal because once that happens, like the person's set free, like from whatever they're holding on to, and I see it a lot, like in just the prison ministries. Like no one ever addressed them when it needed to be done when there were children. Like literally, like we're in the process of this 14-week ministry where they're telling us their story. We're literally sitting with them and getting to the point what caused them to get to where they are. And, you know, in hopes that they can reconcile with the victim. You know, we're sitting with the offenders. They've offended people. They've done something, you know, killed people, whatever it is. We don't know until they open up. And the ultimate goal is reconciliation. Like, you found Jesus, like, you know, he's gonna work through you, you know, just like Hagar. We literally read that story this past Monday, like it's no coincidence, like, and it's beautiful, you know. We had a new volunteer come Monday, and just hearing her story of why she wanted to go into prison, you know, and do what she's doing, and I shared my story, and it's like, okay, like, bring more people, you know, like, these are, and it's true, like, some are like, hey, I have 6 years, but I know God's going to hear my prayers, and I'm going to minister to that 23-year-old that's sitting next to me who doesn't know Jesus or who needs someone to redirect them, you know? But yeah, and it's a rewarding feeling knowing, like, you sat with someone and you brought them to Jesus. Like, now they're going to go and sit with someone else and bring them to.
Yeah. So you said a lot in those few words. But yes, no, I agree. It's beautiful when people, first of all, are reconciled to God, but then also when they're able to reconcile with somebody else. I think it's beautiful either way, and in both those situations. And the scriptures tell us it's beautiful. It's literally the reason Jesus took on flesh, lived the perfect sinless life, went to the cross to die, to be buried, to rise again. All of that is so that we have a path to reconciliation with God. And then we see further into the New Testament that we're called to take up the ministry of reconciliation toward others. And yes, that does mean getting them reconciled to God. But I think also it means living out that same kind of grace and mercy and truth and all of it with each other. So one of the most beautiful things is like a marriage that's about to just blow up. And somehow, right? Like everybody's like, wow, it's done. Sometimes even the people in the marriage are like, wow, it's, forget it. And somehow God heals it. I think that's one of the most beautiful pictures. Just because, not because it's more, not because it's better or something in that situation, but I think it's more obvious. Because when people are in a marriage and it's not going well, if it's just like a buddy or whatever and y'all are mad at each other, you just stop talking to each other. And it's like, we'll move on. You know what I mean? But a marriage breaking apart is very apparent. And usually the people, it's even though you might say you care for that person the most, that's often the situations where the most damage gets done to each other. And because you're so close. And it hurts more coming from that person that you care about, all that. So for that to be able to heal, I just think, man, that's Jesus stuff right there, And I know that's not probably the best English, but y'all get what I mean, right? Yes.
Paul makes a reference that when you do something you're not supposed to do, it's sin. And if you don't do something you're supposed to do, it's sin.
Mm-hmm.
So that's saying that's what we're supposed to do. So if we don't do it, is that sin on our part?
Mm-hmm. Preach. Yeah. So for us to not do this is disobedience. Does everybody get what brother is saying? Yeah, if we don't do this, we're disobeying God. We see the words of Jesus. He tells us to do it. To not do it is to disobey. Oh yeah. And this will eat away at you. So here's so I've been in some situations where the Lord is very patient with us. We should always be grateful for this. And I've been in some situations where, where, where there's been sin issues. Over time, I've kind of got to where it's just, just say it. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. But I've had times where I was much more scared of addressing an issue, right? And so I can think of a time where I knew somebody who was living with a girlfriend, and I thought, he wasn't serving the Lord, but then he, through some conversations, he was all on fire, like, I came back to Jesus, and like, seems all fired up, like, seemed great. And my immediate thing is like, but you're living with your girlfriend, like, you got to fix that, right? Now, that's not the biggest thing probably that was in his life, but it was very obvious. You know what I mean? It was the thing I could see, right? I'm sure there's other issues and stuff, but it was very obvious. So anyway, I'm thinking like, man, at some point I got to talk to him about it. But I didn't do it. Why? For all the reasons we said earlier. It's awkward. It's you don't like conflict. You don't know how they'll take it. You don't know how they'll respond, blah, blah, blah. But some time goes. I'm feeling, it's on my mind. If it was somebody closer, it would have been easier. But we weren't super close. Anyway, I see him at an event, and as soon as I see him, I'm like, I still got to do that. I'm thinking to myself, like, man, I got to talk to him at some point. Anyway, so I just prayed. I just prayed for him, like in the middle of that event. I just prayed, like, I was basically telling God, like, Lord, I know I need to talk to him. Like, please help me find an opportunity for that, and right. And this is like on a Saturday, I think, this event. And so I prayed, Lord, I know I need to address this. Like, I know he wants to honor you. But maybe he doesn't realize the sin that he's in, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember exactly how I prayed. Something to that effect. So then I'm kind of deciding, okay, I got to just kind of build up the courage and go for it, So this was on a Saturday, and Wednesday on Facebook, boom, married. And it might sound weird to you, but this has happened like multiple times. So yes, we should go for it. But what I was going to say is, I think the Lord is gracious to us also, and sometimes just pray on stuff. And by the way, don't keep praying for like 2 years about, should I talk to him? You know what I mean? Like, no, you should go talk to him. But if you need help, if you know it's hard for you to do it, you need to be praying about that. And sometimes God's help is he gives you the strength and the courage to go do it. And sometimes his help is he just takes care of it. And that's pretty beautiful also. No, they really got married. Good question. They really got married. Yeah, they really got married.
at all times, so that I don't offend them in any way. So if they get something wrong that you're trying to explain to them more detailed, that way that other person can say, no, this is what she's saying, because we're just trying to help you.
Right.
Sometimes they get all offended and upset and angry because you're telling them something that is true.
Mhm.
You have somebody else with you, but of course you want another brother or sister of Christ, because then we're gonna go back into the Word of God. So I'm just telling you because I've experienced that a lot.
Yeah.
And I always have to be safe, because then I don't want to hurt them also, but I want them to get corrected.
Yeah, and the goal, I think everybody understands, the goal in this is not to hurt the other person or shame them or anything like that. The goal, we already said, is restoration. The goal, and this goes back to my last question, why does Jesus instruct us to do this at all? It's because he wants us to live righteously and holy, and he wants us to be clean before him. You know, he wants us to live in accordance with his command. So when we're in sin, he doesn't just want us to continue. He wants to use somebody else. Sometimes we're the person sinning and somebody else needs to come tell us. Or sometimes somebody else is sinning and we need to be the person that goes tell them. But the point is he wants his people to actually live holy. And part of that is correction. Right? When we're in the wrong, we need to be corrected so that we can walk in the light and live rightly before him. I was going to say one more thing. Oh, we're not given exact details about how to have the conversation. Does that make sense? So we still need to exercise wisdom in that, and take into consideration other things that the scriptures tell us. I think it would be really dumb to go to somebody and be like, I know what you did, and you're going to hell, and and you better, like, I don't think that's the right way. I think there's a way to bring truth to the person while still having grace, and that is the combination that the Bible tells us Jesus operated in. Grace and truth simultaneously. And so there is ways to do it, and if you need, if you don't know how to do that, pray about it, seek some wisdom from others maybe. Say, hey, I need to address something with somebody. How do I bring this up with someone? And don't even share who it is, because then now, then it's weird, because now more people, you're kind of gossiping a little bit, But just say, hey, I have a friend. I know they're in sin. I know they're a believer. Ask someone wise, how do I talk to them about it? Get some wisdom, pray about it, and then go for it. The goal, let's say this, let me make sure we address this. Based on the rest of the instruction, I think it's pretty clear. Can you actually control the outcome? No. Is there any guarantee that they'll listen? No. In fact, Jesus is giving us what to do if they don't. Right? So there's no guarantee, but the instruction for us, like Brother Tracy said, is to still go and do it.
But do we still have to talk to them?
Good question. So, it sounds like that question, it sounds like you're asking about more if you've been offended.
No, it's where someone does something, to you, like you already spoke to this person and you're like, okay, you know what? I've already helped you enough. I already tried to help you in some way, which I never say, well, you owe me, no. But I just want to I stepped away from that situation and I said, you know what? I'm done. Do I still have to talk to them?
I probably need more details. We can maybe talk about it after, but
I spoke to Dr. Gardner once on that situation, and he said, you can forgive somebody, but you
Yeah,
have
I've
to
already
really have
forgiven
a
that person.
Right.
relationship with that individual.
we've talked about this before, where forgiveness is, we're commanded to forgive. So if we're having trouble forgiving, we got to find a way to work through that. Through prayer, through set free often, sometimes. So get some help if you need some help. If there's somebody that you cannot forgive, get some help to work through that so that you can forgive them, because God commands us to forgive.
I've forgiven that person.
Right.
Just don't want to talk to them.
So the next step is, but can I actually have an ongoing relationship with that person? And we've talked about this before. You still got to exercise wisdom. Some people are so destructive that it's just not wise to stay tight with them, because that destruction spills out to everybody around them.
Okay.
And but here's the key thing. That decision should not be made emotionally. It should be made with as I can't even think of a word. It should be made through wisdom. It should not be made because I'm just up to here with them, so forget it. No, that's an emotional decision. What should be is, I've already forgiven them. I've already, I'm not mad at them. I don't still feel hurt. I'm not suffering. I just know that it's not wise for me to be involved in their life. Right? And to be able to make that decision, you got to get your heart clean first to even know if you're making it, if it's a wise thing or not. So if your heart's not clean about it, you got to be honest with yourself and honest with God about it. Get that cleaned up. Then you can make a decision about, can I continue in relationship with the person or not? But if there's still a lot of emotions around it, if it still makes you mad to think about them, if it's still, probably you're making that decision without. Okay. What's up? Yes. So that's one of the things that I love about the set free process. If you pray, for example, about anger toward a person, God will heal that anger, and that makes it much easier to hear from him about what to do next. And like Agustin said, God will tell you, and it'll be clear. I've prayed with people, and the person they were angry at, we prayed, and then they're like, I want to go hug that person. You know what I mean? So, so I could have listened to them before the prayers, and I could have, and they're saying, man, I don't even want to talk to him anymore. I could have said, oh yeah, just don't talk to him. Just protect yourself. But I know, I've had enough experience to know a bunch of that's just emotions. You know what I mean? Let's fix these emotions first. And then we'll see what God really wants. in your situation. And like I said, I've seen complete perspective changes once they've prayed about anger or sadness or hurt or whatever the emotion is.
Also, like, sometimes it's not always like, hey, I don't, sometimes you do feel like, because I know I feel like I want to talk to that person, God's going to stay away.
Yeah.
It's not always like, I want to stay away, but I want to do it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the main thing. I would say just don't make sure that the decision is not from emotions. You gotta make sure the heart is clean, and then you can be led by the Lord. Okay, we need to wrap up. Now, we're still gonna talk more about this next week, because we talked about kind of the reasons behind and the goal behind this, but we didn't go through all the steps, so we'll come back to this, because it is worthwhile to actually get an understanding of how we, in our setting, need to walk this out and obey, how do we do this process? And we'll talk more about that next week. Do we have